Hello, and welcome to the February 2025 meeting of Triangle Association of Freelancers. This being February, we're going to walk on romance this evening. We've got a wonderful romance roundtable featuring authors Sherri Hollister, LaVerne St. George, and Angela Rush. Ladies, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Dawn, and welcome to everybody who's here at TAF to see this little presentation of ours. What we want to do tonight in our roundtable and our discussion is to answer two questions. What is a romance? And some other related things to that. And then how can you add it to any genre? Would you want to, and how would you do that? So let's just start with who's, as Dawn said, there's going to be me and Sherri, and our third person is Angela Rush. And unfortunately, she has to work. And so we're going to punt a little bit because Angela may be able to come, but she'll come later. But I wanted to tell you a little bit more about me. And in the handouts, you'll see that we all have put our bios up. And there'll be longer bios, but let me just say from my point of view, I'm a hybrid author, both traditionally published and self-published. My first publication, fiction publication, was in 1990, and I write what Amazon calls clean and wholesome, both in the sweet category and in the inspirational category. And sweet, if people are not familiar with that term, means that there's no sex and it's closed bedroom door. That does not mean the story is sweet. The story itself may have some very complicated and interesting conflicts that the characters have to overcome, but basically the most they'll get sensually is kisses. But they have plenty of emotion and plenty of conflict. I'm working on my fourth book now, which is a sweet romance in my Pittsburgh Connections series. So as I said, longer bios in the handout on page 1. So let's start with just an overview of what's going on in the romance business right now, so you'll have an idea. I want to say basically in this slide that it is a big business. $1.44 billion in 2023, which are the most recent numbers that I could find. And you can see a lot of people are reading it. There are a lot of units sold. It does consist of the 34% of the mass market fiction. And that's compared to mystery, which is 28%, science fiction, which is 7.2%, and general fiction, which is 12.9%. Lots of people read romance. And interestingly enough, equally, the ages are spread equally over a lot of groups. So we have young adults or even preteens. There are some series for them, all the way up to like 102. And there are all kinds of things you can read. And funny thing or fascinating and good thing is that 18% of the readers are men. And that is up from 9% about 6 years ago. That part, I always have to laugh because of some of the people that are in that group are in prison. So it makes a lot of sense. So one of the other ways that you can tell that you have a large group of books running around and a lot of print is that Amazon in 2025 lists 105 subcategories of romance.
Wow.
These categories will include the length of the book, whether it's a short read, a long read, maybe it's a series, so it goes on for 15 books, something like that. Time period is another way that romances can be put into a category. Funny thing here is that historical is now considered pre-1950.
Wow.
when I started writing, it used to be 1865 or around the 1880s when the Industrial Revolution started. Now it's 1950. It's kind of interesting. And there is also something about time travel books have their own category. It could be futuristic. The Regency period in England is very popular. Just look at the whole thing with the people on, the big Netflix people going on. And now I can't remember the name.
Bridgerton.
The Bridgertons, yes, right.
Sorry.
Got it. Anyway, it also has a lot of things to do with sensuality. So that whole range of sweet romance to hot and steamy is included. The categories are defining elements, and some of those are things like a paranormal, or it's sci-fi, or it's fantasy, or what it's now called is romantasy. Gothic, military, inspirational, intrigue, all of those could be defining elements and make a category. Audiences like young adults, or there is a category for some publishers, which is people who are going to read who are over 40. And if you can write for those people, then you're in. Publishers always have their own divisions. So if you're writing for a publisher, you want to check and make sure that you know what the divisions are. And there all can be special areas. Early when I was writing, it used to be that the area was there was one area called glitz. Now we call it the billionaire millionaire thing. So that's what the category is. And these are special areas that come and go in popularity. So it's really, really important to stay in touch with what's popular at the time. The other thing that we love in romance, and mystery loves this too, but we are trope people. We write all the tropes, lots of tropes. And if you don't know, a trope is a common theme, a character type, or a plot device. It's kind of a storytelling shortcut. It's going to set the reader expectations. And in romance, familiarity is very important, because if a reader if you can give them, this is the trope, and you are able to write into that trope completely, then you will have a reader for life. And what I have been able to uncover are that there are at least 47 romance tropes. And this comes from a list that was done by Entangled Publishing. But the 47, I think there's a lot more than that. So what I did is just made a list of the top 10 or so. And this is in your handout, so you'll have that for reference later. And you can see that this covers a lot of different things. There's our billionaire millionaire right in the middle. And everything from overcoming odds to fake dating, forced proximity, and bodyguard. We live by our tropes. Romance writers live and die by these. If you can find a trope and put it in your novel, then you're more likely to actually sell something. And I don't know where this next quote came from. I saw it a long time ago, but it kind of sums up, and it's a little dated, but this quote says, "A Harlequin romance is closer to describing a woman's hope for love better than serious fiction." And we know that that's the hope for love. We should underline that like a ton of times, because no matter whether it's the woman, a woman and man in their in the story, or it's a gay romance, or it's aliens, whatever, it's the hope for love. And that's what romance is really all about. So let's get into what is a romance. And I have indicated that this is about genre romance. Genre romance has specific rules that you have to follow in particular characteristics. And so this is also, we gave this to you in your handout, so you'll have it. But here are the 9 basic things. You're going to focus on the romantic relationship. That is actually, that's the plot line. The most important plot line is how are the couple getting together? The conflict that they have can both be internal and external. Both may have to make internal changes to make this romance work, but the conflict may be external, where they're on different sides of an issue, or he's a fireman and she has a shop that the fire inspector is telling her is going to burn down. And so she has to work with the fireman, and this is not a good relationship. It's also, this genre romance is always familiar. And I talked about the categories and tropes, and that is, again, it has to be familiar to the reader. And it's clear that this is a woman's fantasy. So it's the woman's perspective. The woman's point of view is usually used, but more recently, dual points of view. The hero's point of view and the heroine's point of view are both used within the books. And we find that readers really like to know what's going on in a guy's head. And this helps everybody to know how feelings are running around, and how a man might react to something that you would not know in real life. The romantic setting, it's the kind of thing someone told me once, you can make any setting romantic, and you should. So in romance, you can make a cave romantic if you try hard enough. You can make a snowstorm romantic. So we always want to have the setting help with the romance, or hinder it if need be. Sixth thing is that there are always real emotions in the fictional story. So the romantic tension, there's sexual excitement, there's passion, there's emotional security. And even though it's a fictional story, you've got to get those emotions right, because that's why women are reading. They're reading for emotions. We've got strong characters who balance each other. And in this case, what's usually happening is that the couple is going to become a partnership. That's where romance hits, is that 2 people are getting together, and when they finish up, they know that they're equal partners in their relationship. Sometimes that's a little different in other genres, but not in this. And lovemaking, and we talk about lovemaking a lot, and no matter the heat level, is about emotions. And it's best if the love scene and the sex scene affects the romance in some way, or affects the plot in some way. There are some books where like I heard someone in the discussion saying, oh, I just skipped the sex scenes. Doesn't give me anything. Well, if the writer's really, really good, that love scene or sex scene should actually do something to the plot, to their relationship, that it means something. Something should be not just a sexual encounter. And then finally, always underlined 20 times, a happy ending. And that can be the happily ever after, which we hear about, but it can also be happily for now. We'll take either one, but if it's not a happy ending, you have just completely destroyed what we as romance readers want to find at the end of the book. So these are the 9 things that are part of the characteristics of a romance. So to give you a little bit more detail about how you would create a romance if you've never tried to do one before, or if you're thinking about putting a romance in your book, is that there's actually an arc. Like other character arcs or plot arcs, this is an arc from the beginning of the novel to the end. And there are 6 beats, and most of us, I think, as writers, know about movie beats and beats within a story. And these are the 6 that romance, it's pretty mandatory you have all of these. So starting at the beginning of the story, the couple is going to meet. I used to call it the cute meet, and then they switched it to be meet cute. I don't understand why, but it's called the meet cute now. Something interesting happens to get them together. Then the couple starts to fall in love. They're attracted. They want to see each other. They start thinking about each other all the time. And then the couple faces conflicts, could be many conflicts. These can be external conflicts or, again, internal conflicts. Both are working. And then as they're doing that and they think everything's going to go okay, then there's the black moment. Usually one of the characters, it's an internal moment for a lot of romance, and they will say, oh, I'm not with you anymore. I can't do this. Emotionally, you're not the right one. I have to step back. That's the black moment. And then through the plot or through emotional change, there's always like the dark night of the soul that follows that. The black moment, the dark night of the soul go together, where the person is saying, I made a big mistake. That's the biggest mistake I ever made. I need to get back with my person because I really, 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 really love him. I need to do this. And it can be the man or the woman, either person of the couple can do this. They resolve the conflict. And then at the end of the book, there's always the happily ever after or the happily for now. And in a romance, you will notice that there will usually be a scene. It may be an epilogue or it may be a scene which gives you, this is how they end up. They started in the beginning not really liking each other or not wanting to do anything together or having these conflicts. But at the end, you see them on the new trajectory that they've both made changes and they're going to be happy together. Yay. And the promise of romance, they call it the romantic, the romance promise is we get the HEA. If you don't give us an HEA, then you don't have a genre romance. You've got a love story of some kind, but you don't have a genre romance. So those are the basic elements of a romance arc. There's some characteristics of the romance, and there are tropes that are your tools to use when creating a romance. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
Wow.
What made you go towards the non-sensual ones as opposed to the red hot ones?
I guess I found that I could actually rate, I could read sex scenes, but when I started writing them, I could never make it happen. All my stories just come out sweet. The bedroom door is closed or there's kisses and that's it. And it was just kind of weird that it did that, because I wrote a lot of things that were sweet, and I wrote one really hot love scene, and everybody I gave it to critique said, oh my gosh, you did this? That's unreal. We didn't even know you had that in you. Okay. But that's not true. So I see that Stacy raised her hand.
Yes, I'm the dog face. I did put my question in the chat, but and forgive me because I don't read romance regularly, but I'm obviously here because I'm interested in learning more about it.
Sure.
When it comes to a trope, is that something that's just implied in the plot, or do you introduce it in the preface? How does that work when you're working with a trope?
That's a good question. Tropes are implied while you're writing, but tropes are specifically mentioned in any marketing that you do. They're a marketing tool.
Okay, so when you're marketing the book, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, so like if I come back and I say, this is a romance set in Milwaukee, it is a forbidden love story between this person and this person. And if since it's forbidden love, I might say a little bit about what's keeping them apart. So you can actually say this, yes, this is a millionaire romance. Or you do it through your cover. Your cover can do it too, to give you that.
That makes sense. Got it.
So.
Thank you.
Any other questions right now?
Hello, yes. This is Kit.
Hi, Kit.
I put in the chat also, but for the ending, how would a cliffhanger factor into the HEA/HAHFN?
If we know that the cliffhanger is taking us to the next book, we're okay with that. If it's a series. But if you end a book on a cliffhanger and you don't let us know that the couple is together, maybe the external situation is a cliffhanger, but if those two aren't together for their happily for now or happily ever after, you don't have a romance, you have something else. So when you start to market that book, you'll have to look at other genres and other types of literature that will have that kind of ending.
For my mystery series, I have a running romance where they don't get together. And at the end of the romance, they will finally, at the end of the mystery series, they'll finally get together. But that is a different genre. And you see the different levels. For romance, I think you really have to have that relationship, at least happy for now, even if in the next book they have problems, you know.
I always think of Buffy the Vampire Slayer because
Yes.
there's a romance going on, but it never gets to the end. But you know they're opposites attract. But it keeps.
But
your
is it
interest.
actually a romance?
Yeah.
Would that be
It's urban
classified as a
fantasy.
romance?
I call it that.
I was thinking more along the lines of like a love triangle, where she might end with one when the book ends, but she's meant to be with the other in the next book. So if it's a love triangle, that would still not be a romance because she doesn't end happily ever after, or is it happily for now since she's with one of the two?
Again,
Well,
I think,
if
go
she-
ahead, Sherri.
I think if you end the story with her with the one she has chosen, and it's believable ending, and it's a happy for now, even if she ends up with the other person in the end of the series, I think it's a believable ending. I think that's the whole thing. It's got to be a satisfying, happy for now. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
And when we're talking about this differences between the endings and what you put in it, it really has a lot to do with where you're going to market it or sell it or what category you're going to put it in. And sometimes you may put out a book in one Amazon category as a romance, and you start to find out that that's not working. It's just not selling. Then you need to go into Amazon and switch the categories and try something else. If you give it a couple of months and there's nothing moving on the shelves, and you've got the wrong category. Because people will look at your cover and everything and say, this isn't what I expect. So. Okay, so what we wanted to just talk about now is just to say, how do we use this romance arc? And Sherri, I'm going to ask you to start that off about how do you use this arc in your writing?
Okay, I'm Sherri Hollister, and I write mostly romantic suspense, contemporary romantic suspense, but I also write cozy mystery, historical cozy mystery, and that's what I was talking about. For me, in the contemporary romantic suspense, I follow this pretty well with the dual plot. I will conflict with LaVerne on, I have a very male, I think my books are very, they seem to go more masculine than feminine, or at least they're split half and half. I think that has to do with raising 6 boys, but a lot of my stories are blowing things up and killing people. So, you know, we get a lot of the man's point of view in the story, you know. but I feel like you have to have that dual um, plot line where you're having the suspense going right along with the romance. And sometimes it's a balancing act to make sure you have all of the 6 points going on at the same time because you don't want to lose traction in the romance, especially when you're marketing as a romance. If I'm marketing as a suspense, I can just have the romance going on underneath and don't have to worry so much about it. You still want to go with those 6 points, but it's I think it's a little bit lighter. The suspense is the main focus of the story, so the romance is just kind of an afterthought, more or less, kind of weaving through there. But if it's a romantic suspense, you have to hit those points.
Thanks, Sherri. So from my point of view, because I write sweet romance and I'm definitely within the romance category, I actually use an extended version of this particular arc because in order to keep track of where the romance is going, since that's the absolutely main piece of my novels, there's a book that I use called Romancing the Beat. And that book allows for 20 beats within the novel. It will get you to the same place. It's the same arc that we're seeing on the screen. But what it does is fills in some of these gaps to make sure that that the flow of the romance is running from one thing to another and the reader isn't tripped up by, oh, well, how did they get there? Wow, he's kissing her, but he doesn't even like her. I don't understand. And if you have the beats correctly, then the romance will flow correctly. So that's how I use the arc. But as I said, I use an extended arc to be able to do that. Sarah, I see you've had your hand up. Oh, there she is. Hi.
So I have romance in my memoir, but I gotta tell it, like it happened. I think I have the elements of the romance arc, except the black moment is a potential black moment.
Mm.
Like, and so, you know, it is an element in my story, but I think if I amp up the romantic element of my marriage and how I met my husband, it may add to the overall compellingness of the story, and but yeah, so I didn't know if there's a such thing as the potential black moment or what you assume is going to be the black moment, but then ends up being okay anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that there is a use for that. And in fact, there should be a hint of that through the novel, that one of the people has a particular reason that they don't want to be with this other person. And one of my writer friends once said, at this point in the story, what is keeping these two people apart?
Okay.
It's going to be either something external or internal, but right now, every time you're going through that arc, it's what's keeping them away until you get to the resolving the conflicts, and that's going to be near the end of the book.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Andrea
That's
brought
helpful. I
out
think
a-
this will be very helpful for amping up that element in my book.
Yeah.
Andrea brought out a good point. She said that's the point. The black moment is where they choose fear over hope. And I think that's in any relationship, we often find that point where even if we're not going to leave our husband or something like that, where we're afraid that the relationship's not going to work for some reason or another. And there's that fear. And if you give into the fear, there's that possibility of everything falling apart. But if you if you lean towards the hope side, then everything will end up with your happy ever after, Or does that make sense on how to use it?
I think it does. In my case, I withhold my schizophrenia diagnosis from the guy I'm dating, and I tell him about everything, but I can't tell him that word. And then he proposes, and then I decide to tell him the big S word 2 days later. So that definitely fear over, that definitely is relevant there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say that was your black moment,
Okay.
having to tell him that and being afraid that he's going to say no, because you don't know how he's going to react when you say that word, you know?
Yeah, like is the
And
wedding off now or the
yeah,
engagement?
yeah,
Yeah.
and you've got all that fear going on, but you step into the hope and you had your happy moment. But if you hadn't of, what would have happened?
I would have had to live in fear of him finding out or that I had lied
Right.
to him or something.
And you can see where this conversation is going is that we're talking about feelings all the time. We're talking about what's the emotional content here. And in a romance, that's where your focus is. What's going on inside of these people?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
you.
it's an interesting kind of thing to do. So the other question we wanted to just kind of answer and run through is, why would you want to use this romance arc in another genre? Why would you do that? And Sarah was just talking about a memoir that she's doing, and it has a love theme in it, a romance in it, and she's going to use this arc to help, as she says, beef it up and get it a little bit stronger. And one of the things I know is that from filmmakers already figured out that if they add a relationship to any story, a mystery, a shoot 'em up, big blockbuster, if they add a relationship and throw in a romance of some kind, at least a love story, women come to see the movie. They'll go with their guys to see it. And it's very interesting that that happens. And so I have found that keeps me thinking about how you would use it somewhere else, because if you write another genre that is male related, but you would like to possibly get more females to read, you might want to add a romance in it. I think that Angela had said, and Sherri had concurred, that you can also use it in a story. If you've got some kind of love story underneath or a romance underneath, it ups the stakes if you're doing a suspense story. That person could get hurt, or the person you're falling in love with could get kidnapped. Angela says that's her favorite trope, is to have the female character be kidnapped and then the hero has to go and save her. So that's how she works that out. And I think what we were talking about, the fear over the hope, this is one of the things that keeps romance writers going, is that we understand that we're dropping hope into the world. And we're saying love is possible, there is hope, and there's hope of getting a partner who is going to be with you for now or for long term. And hope is something that people really want to hear about. And no matter when we've been writing romance, that is one of the big draws. Is there anything else, Sherri, that you can think of?
Other than what we were talking about, using romance in other genres, we were talking, what else would make, let me rephrase this. Why else would we use the romance in the stories, and also when not to use romance? And I thought you brought up a good point of, it's important to use romance only if we believe in it. If you're not a strong believer in putting romance in your story, don't do it. Or if the story doesn't call for it. And
Right.
I thought that was a good point that you brought up when we were talking about it.
No question. How much agency do the women in romances have? In other words, how much action that's positive or building this stuff up towards a happy ending? how much do these women characters have in terms of influence? Is it generally the guy is going to, turn them down, or does, does the woman do so, or,
They
I
got
think
the power.
that,
They got the
Um,
power, baby.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In
I think
because
women
this is
like that.
because this is women's fantasy for one thing, most of the women are strong women, or they start out, maybe they don't know exactly what they're doing, but as the story goes along, they become stronger. And they, in fact, have a great deal of agency. Romance was one of the very first genres that really allowed women to get out of the roles that they were playing and into something that was more powerful within the relationship. And as I said, what you're trying to get to is two strong characters balancing each other. And that's where you want to head to when you're doing this whole thing. So if a man is really strong, he's going to need someone who's going to fill in the blanks of things that he might not have or that he's missing emotionally or in his life. And she's going to be able to do that, but he's going to also fill in some holes that she might have. So it's always a balance, and that's what we're trying to get to. Yeah, most of the women are, they do everything. They're professionals. We have people who are, the women presidents and stuff in our stories. So they can do anything and have any occupation, but the whole point is that they have quite a bit of agency in whether this relationship is going to work or not.
My first book, the girl was a tow truck driver.
Tow truck
So,
driver, yeah, that's pretty good.
She was a tow truck driver, yeah. So yeah, she was a bit of a ball buster. So as you can tell, I write anything but sweet romance. But yeah, I think that the whole point is that there's someone for everyone, or that's what we want to believe. That is the whole idea of a romantic novel, is that even the 300-pound woman can find a man that loves her and thinks she's beautiful. The guy that is a nerd and everybody laughed at in school can find the person that thinks he's beautiful. I mean, it's about agency. It's about finding that person that sees you and sees the real you and all the wonderful parts of you, and I think that is what romance is all about. When I think about my husband, other people might look at him and say, he's a broken down old man, but to me, he's still the 16-year-old boy I remember, and I think that for most of us, when we have that romantic interest, that person to us is always going to be seen through a certain lens. And that's what romance is.
So what I wanted to do now is to just quickly, because I'm watching the time, is I'm going to share part of the handout where we have some examples of these are titles of movies of what is a romance and what isn't. And what I'm going to do is move over to that, and we'll take a look at those. We call it the Romance Roundtable game. So is it a romance or a love story? And these were Sherri's picks, and we'll just do a couple of these so we get an idea of what is and what isn't. So I want to know what you think. So The Other Side of the Mountain, if you've seen it or read it.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. Okay. And why isn't it?
I think it's more of her development, and it doesn't have a happy ending in the sense that he
No, it
dies.
doesn't.
Right. Okay, good.
But
So
it just,
definitely not.
It has a nice love story, but it's
Yeah.
not a genre romance.
And that's pretty much how we will distinguish something.
Yeah.
And you'll say this is like mainstream fiction with a love story, or this is a cozy mystery with a love story.
Mm.
That is something that you can then key to people, especially agents or editors who are looking at your work, and to readers, that that's what you're doing, is that your main focus is on the history or the story that's going on. The Notebook by Sparks.
No,
This is definitely no. There is a wonderful
no
love
happy
story in
ending.
it, kind of thing. But the main story doesn't really have a happy ending. So Nicholas writes a lot of good stuff, but most of it is not romance, but has really wonderful love stories. Okay, Dirty Dancing.
I would say yes.
Yeah, this is
I would say
really
yes too.
nobody puts baby in a corner.
Exactly.
and this is the kind of thing where when you watch it, you know, it's always about the two of them. And
Mhm.
he's kind of obsessed with her. She's thinking about him all the time. It's always about them.
Mm.
Ghost.
Now
Mhm.
that can't really be a love story, though it's an interesting story because, you know, one of them's
Well, it's a
dead,
love story,
so-
but not a romance.
Yeah, it's not a romance. Yeah,
No.
because the main character is dead.
Yeah, he's already
Very
dead, so
much.
yeah.
Now wait, but wait, isn't there a happy ending in a different way?
In a different way.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yeah, but do you
Yeah.
really call that romance, Susan?
Well, no, I wouldn't call it a romance only because
More of a
the
weird
beginning,
drama.
because they do the couple that is going to be united at the end does not have a crisis of their own making that keeps them apart.
Right.
Yeah, I
I
guess,
think
yeah.
I think their problems are resolved, so to speak, but it's not a happy ending.
No.
They come to a level of acceptance.
Of acceptance. Yeah.
And it's so sad.
It is so sad. See, well, that's what we don't like. We don't like to be crying because it's sad. We want to be crying because we are loving it. Yeah. No. Rocky.
Mm.
And I swear, I think this is a romance.
It's
No, to a certain degree, the first movie is somewhat of a romance. It has a really
Yeah.
strong love story in it because it's the growth of their relationship and, you know, how they maneuver with his new kind of thing. But that the plot line is actually a secondary plot line,
Yeah.
but it is very, very strong in the story.
Mm.
well, if anybody reads or works with Save the Cat, the Save
Yes.
the Cat, the filmmakers' beats really coincide with a lot of other fiction beats, and I would call the romance the B plot. That in terms, Save the Cat would call it the B plot.
B plot,
which
the
typically
secondary plot. Yeah,
begins
yeah.
around page 20 of a 110-page screenplay, to give you an idea of how that works. And the romance arc should impinge on or intersect with the main plot at several points to really be successful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I know that I'm going to leave the other 5 for you all to look at the handout and figure out why and why not they are romances. But I did also want to bring up last month we were talking about the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros, which is a fantasy with dragons and all kinds of cool stuff. And I was wondering about that as a romance too, because there is a strong love story, but it is really about the war and the dragons and her becoming a writer. So I was thinking, no, if you're reading that, you're still going to love the love story, but and we don't know what the ending is yet because we only saw 3 books.
Can you repeat the title on that?
It's called the Empyrean series. EMPYREAN. It's by Rebecca Yarros, and the first book is called Fourth Wing, like the number 4, Fourth Wing. And you need to start at the beginning. It's a fantasy. It's wonderful. Giving my thing. So I will stop sharing everything there. I will thank you all for your attention and for being here tonight. Are there any other questions?
I have a suggestion.
Okay.
And this is just, I'm simply throwing it out, and anybody who wants to use it as a basis for a plot is welcome to. My brother and his partner live in England. They have a large country estate, and they volunteered to take in a Ukrainian refugee family. And so this beautiful woman with 3 children under the age of 8, one of whom is an infant, winds up coming to their home, and she's desperately trying to get her husband to England, and he's in the Merchant Marine, so he doesn't, he's not in the Ukraine and not being drafted. But anyway, my brother Michael asked her once, how did you meet your husband? And she says, I arrested him.
Yeah, that's good.
For brawling.
Yeah.
And then Michael says, well, oh, you were a policewoman. Oh, yes, that was back before I was teaching. She evidently teaches or taught the police force in Odessa. And the reason she'd been assigned to teach is that she was also, before that, the qualified sniper for the police. So I wouldn't mess with her, but
Yeah.
Oh, Joel, that's great. Yeah.
yeah. So you know, you
that.
take that hat as you want. You know, my brother is gay, so he's not getting himself involved with it. But I could see where, you know, you could make a plot run
Nice
like that.
plot.
But that
Yeah.
bit of, I could just imagine my brother's face when she said, "Oh, I arrested him."
I am not sure we would qualify that as a cute meet.
Well, yeah, that's a good question.
Might not be cute, but it's a really interesting meet, and that'll work.
And what do you do?
I would probably use it.
I'm a qualified sniper, but
I'm a
excuse me, I have to go
qualified
change
sniper,
some. But excuse me, I have to go change some diapers.
LaVerne, Sherri, thank you so very, very much for this presentation. This was fantastic. And I think it really explained to a lot of people who may not have been that familiar about the romance genre exactly how big it is, and more importantly, how important it is in American literature. And I really hope that a lot of our members will take to heart the advice and the insight and the information that you shared this evening. Before we move on, one last time, is there anyone else who has any final questions for either on this issue of romance? Okay, awesome.